Good afternoon, my name is Buddy King. I am a former employee and a friend of Ben Osborne. I would like to take a moment to thank the family for this opportunity, this privilege to say a few words today in remembrance of their loved one. Thank you. I first met Ben in 1995. I had been working for the Osborne Company for about a week. I was working as a helper on a job helping my uncle, who had already been working for Ben for a period of time. And Ben stopped by the job to deliver my first paycheck. I can remember that during the course of conversation that day, Ben was talking to my uncle, and he asked my uncle about my experience, what my skill level was, and things I was capable of. And I recall my uncle telling Ben, he said, he can do whatever I can do. Well, at that time in my life, that was a bit of a stretch, but Ben proceeded over to chat with me, and it wasn't long before Ben asked me how I felt about taking on my own projects. I was honest with Ben. I told him that I didn't really have that kind of experience, and that actually I'd be terrified to take on my own project. Well, as many of you know, that was one of Ben's favorite things to hear, that you hadn't done something before and that you were anxious, you'd be anxious about trying it. So needless to say, no was not an option. So Ben did start me out on a few of my own small projects, and then shortly after a few small ones, he approached me and asked me about taking on a two-story garage addition. You want to know if I'd be interested in tackling that kind of project by myself. I remember telling him no way, that I'd never built anything that large, and not to mention by myself, and no, I wasn't interested. Well, Ben had an incredible ability to turn things around on you when you would say that sort of thing, turn it around on you, and it just somehow instill confidence and encouragement, and somehow you would exit the conversation no longer thinking that you couldn't do whatever it was, but that you could. I remember him saying, Bud, he said, the large projects are no different than the small projects. They're completed exactly the same way, one brick at a time. He said, there's just more bricks. So with Ben's encouragement and his mentoring, we did go on to complete that project and many more. Ben was not only a gifted mentor, Ben was also very generous. There's quite a few stories I could tell you about his generosity, but there is one story that's pretty special to me. It wasn't too long after I started working for Ben that I was looking to get married, but I didn't have the money to invest in an engagement ring. So Ben introduced me to a friend of his that sold jewelry, and after I picked out a ring, Ben loaned me the deposit on the ring, which was half the cost. And it wasn't too long, at least to me, it didn't seem like too long after that it felt like it was going to take forever to pay Ben back that first half, much less pay for the rest of the ring. So I'll never forget standing in front of Ben's white desk in his basement office. I guess I was lamenting about this fact, that I was never going to be able to get married because I couldn't pay for the ring. Ben walked over to the other side of his office, brought the checkbook over, and wrote me a check for the second half of the ring, for the deposit. Only this time, he didn't ask me to pay it back. That was Ben, always looking for an opportunity to make a positive difference in someone's life. Very generous. Ben and I reminisced about these stories and many, many more earlier this year, actually, when I went to visit him at his house soon after Sana called me with the news, or notified me of the news. Ben's condition. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about all the Wendy's spicy chicken sandwiches and the combination fried rice lunches that we had at his house, and talked about, we tried to remember all the experiences we could at the different jobs. There were a few we just had vague memories of and couldn't bring to recollection, but Ben actually remembered quite a few that I couldn't remember. We talked about all the mistakes that I made along the way that Ben had to pay for. Yeah, I guess that's the investment that he made in folks. You might have heard about your mistakes, but Ben always backed his folks up in front of the customers or whoever. He always stood behind his people. The one funny thing that I reminded Ben of that he finally remembered, I was on a basement job, and he brought over some stilts. He wanted me to use the stilts to finish the drywall ceiling. And I told him, I said, Ben, I've never used these things. I don't know how to use them. I wasn't comfortable with it. He said, it's easy. It's no problem. Let me show you. So he stuck the stilts on his feet, took off walking, and walked headlong right into a steel beam with his forehead. He did laugh a little bit on that one. As our visit at his house was finishing up, there was one more thing that Ben and I talked about. I asked Ben if he'd ever thought about the afterlife, and he said that actually he had thought about it quite a bit recently. So we chatted for a few minutes. We talked about the reality of heaven and hell. We talked about the fact that all of us have sinned, and we all fall short of God's standard, and we all need a Savior. Then I took a moment, I paused, and I asked him, what did he think about all that? And he started to share some of the amazing stories of his time in the Coast Guard, about some of the folks that he had rescued during the time he served in the Coast Guard. And he indicated to me that he felt that God would see all of the good that he'd done in his life and take that into account. And I have to tell you, one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life is to tell a good man like Ben Osborne that all of the good deeds done in this life, they have no merit. No merit with respect to entrance into heaven. And I explained to him that, God doesn't have a scale up in heaven, that he weighs the good and the bad, and if, you do more good than you do bad, you get into heaven. And I told him, I said, it's only by trusting in the person and work of Jesus Christ that a person is made righteous before God. And we opened the Bible and we read Ephesians 2:8 and 9. That says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no man may boast." And Ben looked at me, and he said with that very matter-of-fact Ben Osborne voice, he says, "Well, bud, I guess I'm going to have to change my thinking on that." I kind of left it at that. We stood up. I hugged him. I told him I loved him. We walked over to the front door, and I asked him, I said, please think about everything we talked about. I said, I want to see you in heaven. I want us to build things again, build up in heaven. And that's when he looked at me and said the last words that he'd ever say to me. He said, "Bud, I think I'm going to beat you there."